Our meeting now, and thank you for your patience while we just get ourselves organised for our very first meeting. So welcome everybody to the first proper Regional Transport Committee of this new triennium, and I'm the Chair, Penny Gaylor, and I'll start with the karakia, but then I'd like to just go around the table for us all to introduce ourselves and who we are representing. We're all a bit new to one another around this table. So, whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hiaki ana ta ata kura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, te hei mauriora. So, look forward to some very good presentations, and may I start with going around from my left, Emma, if you just where each of you is from and your name, thanks. Sorry, actually, and also mindful we are on live stream, so all the more reason for us to use the microphones when we're speaking, because otherwise people have no idea what's going on. It's the button on the right, and we can only have two on at a time. Lovely, thank you.
Kia ora tātou, ko Spate toko ingoa. I'm the Director of Regional Relationship for NZTA Waka Kotahi and statutory member of the RTC. Kia ora.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Andy Lyon, General Manager for KiwiRail for the Wellington Network.
So, Councillor Tony Randall, I'm the Wellington City Council representative to the committee.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Martin Halliday-Ahu. I'm Deputy Mayor at the wonderful Kapiti Coast, and I'm a stand-in today. I'm the second. Steve Boddicker, who is the primary person, couldn't make it today. He will be checking things on the recording, and look forward to how the meeting goes.
Kia ora koutou, Steve Cretney, Carden District Council Mayor.
Craig Bowyer, Deputy Mayor Marsden. I'm the alternate for Bex Johnson.
Kia ora koutou, Darren Ponter, Councillor with the Greater Wellington Regional Council from Porniki.
Kia ora koutou, Simon Edwards, Hutt City Councillor.
Lovely, thank you very much, Darren. You're on microphone. Thank you. So we'll launch into our business for the day. Firstly, apologies. I have from Mayor Bex Johnson and Stephen Boddicker. So I'll put those. Oh, sorry, no. I have a mover and a seconder for accepting those apologies, please. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Simon. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, motion's carried. So excuse me squinting, but just in case I need to check the names, that's why I'm squinting, not because I doubt you in any way. So thank you. Conflicts of interest declarations. Anybody? Good, that's a good start. And now we're going to have public participation, and so we have Fred McDonald. Oh, welcome, Fran.
Thank you for lateness.
Oh.
Held up on the way here.
Oh, blinking traffic, eh?
Wasn't good to come on the train.
So we have just done the introductions, Fran. So welcome to the Regional Council, the Regional Transport Committee. So pardon me, anybody, if I misspeak and call us the Wellington Regional whatevers.
I know what it is.
Thank you. I know. Yeah, brilliant. Great to have everybody around the table, and welcome to the new year. So Fred, 5 minutes, and that includes question time. So there we go. And Francis is doing the timer. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Fred MacDonald, Sunny Otehi. I'm here to raise a number of subjects and basically looking for the leadership in the room to advocate and represent on the following issues.
Actually, Fred, probably just you're yelling. It's coming across yelling. So just yeah, like that's lovely. Thank you.
Okay, the first one is a regional issue. We need straps on buses to secure prams and wheelchairs. I witnessed an incident with a baby in a pram. The driver went from a standing stop, turned right, the pram tipped over, the baby's head missed the steel pole by that much, which could have killed him or given him lifelong injuries. They're on the trains everywhere, but no on the buses. So that's one issue that needs to be looked at. We'd also like progress on interchange at Peka Peka, NZTA listening. Stephen Joyce, previous Transport Minister, promised it. The people of Te Horo and Peka Peka are disadvantaged not being able to access the efficiency of the new expressway. Services to Palmerston North, we've got more or less no services. I ran the railway station Otaki for 9 years. I had 12 passenger trains and 20 odd buses. Now we've got 3 buses and 2 trains. That's it. What you could do is like they did in Nelson, they could make the road a notional railway, then they get the funding and get services operating. We're forced to go to Palmy for our health, but a lot of people can't get there and a lot of appointments are missed. The bus service to Route 290, I thank Regional Council for providing that service. It's going really well, but in Otaki we lack a lot of infrastructure like shelters and seats. Go to Paraparaumu, they're all over the place, so we'd like that looked into so that the customers get better service. The one last thing, the South Island stolen a march on us in respect of rugby. Dunedin and Christchurch have got lids on their facilities. We'd like to advance the Cake Tin or the Wellington Regional Stadium to see if we can get a lid there. I tried to find out if there was money paid back from the original loan, but couldn't work through the balance sheet to find an answer for that. But let's see somebody start the ball rolling, and I would like to start a campaign when people say farewell to each other, instead of saying goodbye, see you later, say put a lid on the Cake Tin. It gets everyone talking. Anyone got any questions? I know it's sort of fairly rushed what I'm presenting, but there's some very important issues that aren't being addressed out in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Questions, Councillor Halliday. Thank you.
Hi, Fred.
There, Martin.
I didn't have any questions. I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that you've come down from Otaki today. You presented at our council meeting 2 Thursdays ago, which was well received and taken on board, especially the issues around the connections in Otaki and also the requirement for bus shelters as well. I think that's quite a big issue. And that's also, so thank you for coming in and bringing it to the attention of the table here. And we'll certainly be following it up. Steve is a key person on this committee. I'm just filling in for him today. But he was at the meeting the other Thursday as well. And you were on my list to give a call to after this meeting to let you know that I brought up your topics here, but you've just done a fantastic job of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. My journey started at 8 minutes past 7 on the bus from home, down to Waikanai on the train, and I've had to use my snapper card. It really hurts because I've got a gold card and I haven't been able to, I've been able to use the services. So I'd like to ask the Regional Council to make the gold card facility all day long instead of the limited time that it is at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else got any questions? No, we're all good. Thank you very much, Fred.
Thank you.
And if you just turn the red light off, thanks. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Right. So now we'll move on to item number 4 on page 5. And who is leading us through this one?
Morena tato, ko Vij Kuyela Tokoinua. My name is Vij Kuyela. I manage the Wellington Transport Analytics Unit team here based at Greater Wellington. It is my pleasure to introduce the annual monitoring report, which is a legislative requirement of the Land Transport Management Act. So we've put together this report, which does look backward. It does look retrospectively, really as a requirement for the RLTP 2021. And what it does is it looks at the financial year 2024-2025. So really it is a point in time looking retrospectively at a number of headline targets and indicators and measures which is really how the requirements are in the legislation for us to monitor how things are tracking. So this is more a verbal update, and we are hoping that the report has been read. And the three main headline targets that I would like to draw your attention to, one is the mode share for public transport active travel that has declined when we look at that financial year 2024-2025 and when we compare that to a year ago. Similarly, with death and serious injuries, we see that that indicator has stayed the same when we look at a year prior. And the third headline indicator and target is regarding land transport carbon emissions. There, the news is more positive, things have improved. And when we look at those three indicators overall, what we conclude in the report is that things are not looking that great for us to meet the 2030 target. And there are a number of other measures underneath those three groupings exploring the narrative a bit more. So very open to taking any questions. I've got my team here behind me who are ready to take on any questions that you may have. There will be more opportunities for looking forward, building on this, on the data we're seeing in the report. Later on in the workshop, we've got more of an exploratory narrative looking at the state of the transport network, which has got more up-to-date data in it, and really keen to get your input as we plan towards looking at reviewing these headline indicators and measures for the RLTP 2027 moving forward, which we are keen to get your feedback to really incorporate that on how we can make things better looking forward in the future. So back to you, Madam Chair, to coordinate any feedback and questions.
Great, thank you very much. And so do we have a lineup of questions? Not yet. So Councillor Randall, Councillor Edwards.
Yes. Look, it's obviously a disappointing result, but we need to work from the information, and I thank you for all the work that's gone in behind this stuff. I noticed that my concern in the decline of public transport mode share and in absolute terms, you've got an interesting sub-point on page 15 of the report, which is page 30 of the agenda, about how the public service census found 65% have some form of flexible working arrangement. So, I mean, I guess the first question you see that things aren't working is how much. Do you have any information on whether the factors that are causing the fall in public transport are temporary or permanent? Because this one is sort of a permanent change in habits in a way.
Thank you for that question. So we explore a lot more around working from home, and that's how impacting the use or the patronage of public transport a lot more in the state of the transport network. But I am going to defer this question to my colleague at the back. I will pass on to Stephen.
Morena Tato, thank you for that question about, excuse me, working from home. So I think the question was really around to what extent do we understand what's happened and whether it's a permanent or temporary change. And unfortunately, I can't tell what's going to happen in the future, but we do know that the increase in working from home is a large one. From about 10% of the workforce in the 2018 census to about 20% or more. So slightly more than a doubling the number of the proportion of workers working from home then. And the patterns in public transport patronage would suggest that we're not seeing much of a change in that. The reduced patronage, particularly on trains rather than buses, is partly being driven by that working from home, probably also other factors, service level disruptions, and the fact that train patronage tends to be for people travelling longer distances focused on peak periods, which is very much influenced by that working from home pattern. People with longer journeys stand to perhaps get more benefit out of workplace flexibility.
So just to confirm, it's been a big trend. Do you think this is a permanent? And according to information, is this pretty well? It's now going to be at 20% going forward, or maybe we should assume it's going 20% because we want to use this information, obviously, to go forward.
Well, I think that would be consistent with what's been seen in other places. In fact, that working from home transition has been larger in Auckland, Sydney, London, and other places that we look at.
Right, and just one last, if I can, is this? I know we're looking at public transport, but is this work from home thing also affect other like normal traffic or active mode as well? Do you see the same effect? And I know that, for example, lots of people now take either Monday or Friday or both Mondays and Fridays off, and we end up with this congestion Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and actually it's pretty easy on Friday and Monday. Does that affect is that all the modes or just public transport? Or is public transport worse?
It does affect road traffic as well. So, I mean, you're exactly right in those. Monday and Friday have seen more of a drop in traffic on the highways and other roads than Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday is the quietest day during the working week. I think of it as being kind of a hybrid now between a working day and a weekend day. And in addition to that, there's been something of a flattening in the peak periods. At some locations anyway, and growth in shoulder and off-peak travel on the roads. So certainly it has occurred to some extent on.
So the peak is flatter but longer now, to a point.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. I've got a lineup of questions, but actually I want to jump in there and ask a follow-up to Councillor Randall's question. So could part of that be the loss of jobs in Wellington?
I don't think we've analysed the impact of loss of jobs on the roading network or the rail network as such. You'd assume there are multiple things going on, and that's something we can look at if there is quantitatively, if there is data, or we can look at that in the future if there is anecdotal evidence. But we haven't looked at the impact of job losses on the transport network.
I would think that am I right? And I don't know if any other people have picked up on that, but is it about 10,000? Is that the right number that they're talking about? So that is significant and surely kind of quite a big impact. Thank you. Next, I have Councillor Edwards, Mayor Z, and then Mayor Wild.
Thank you. Mine's a bit of a niche question, I guess, although it's important when we're talking about mode share and setting up good behaviours early, and it's to do with cycling, and particularly school kids biking to school. I see that we've Pedal Ready has put through thousands of kids through that program, which is a good thing. But unfortunately, the number of kids, what percentage of kids who bike to school has dropped. But on page 37 of our agenda, there's mention of a pilot program, Kia Mura Te Arakura, that Greater Wellington carried out that seemed to have some success in lifting the number of kids biking to schools at 10 schools. And so the question, are we looking at any changing round of our getting kids prepared to cycle to school programs as a result of that pilot?
I'll defer to my boss, Grant, who looks after one of those teams there. Thank you.
So, kia ora, perhaps I should have just sat here to start off with. So I'm Grant Fletcher, for those I haven't met yet. So I think the question was around what are we doing around encouraging uptake of cycling through the schools program, is that? So the two programs that we have to encourage or support cycling by school children are the Moving March program, which is about to kick off, which is designed to encourage the use of active modes by school children during the busiest time of the year when people are forming travel habits, and also the Pedal Ready program. So they're both successful programs. I can say that Pedal Ready, the number of participants in that program has continued to grow. So we are, I think, between up to 5% over where we were last year. And with the Moving March, we were on track to have the same number of schools, which is around about 125 schools enrolled in that particular program. So that reaches most of the elementary schools. The question, we have done some longitudinal survey work with past participants, which indicates, and this is just it's a qualitative, not a quantitative survey, that that activity does have a lasting impact on children. The question is then, what are the opportunities in the transport infrastructure in the future for them to be able to use those, to use active modes such as cycling or walking as a viable choice. The other point I'd also make about the uptake particularly for commuting journeys, is also the distance. So the indication indicates that there are certain distances beyond which the active modes don't work, because it just simply takes too long, and that's when, if we're looking for mode shift, we need to look to PT to operate as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Is that good? So I'll now go to Mayor Z. Online.
Kia ora, I didn't have my hand up for a question, but I will just use this to apologise for being late. We couldn't get into the meeting room. So kia ora, I'm Mayor Perry Day from Park City Council, for anyone who doesn't know. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you very much. So then we'll jump on to Mayor Wild now. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, ko Samantha Gain tōku ingoa. I'm Samantha Gain, I'm the Group Manager of Metlink at the Regional Council. The breakdown by line, Mayor Wild, is in our monthly PT performance report, which will be reported to the Public Transport Committee meeting on Thursday, and it's also on our website, so we have got that information. We can feed it through.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Leggett online.
Can you hear me? Are you there?
Yes, we can hear you, thank you.
Oh, very good. Sorry, I'm just standing in for Mayor Baker that we didn't pick up initially. I just have a general point regarding on page 15. You indicate that this is a wording thing. I'm sorry to be pedantic here, but page 15, the headline results. You use the term likely insufficient to meet the 3 RLTP headline targets by 2030. And at the end, you use the word unlikely as opposed to likely insufficient. I would say, personally, it's a personal thing, I'd say it's highly unlikely that they'll be met. But we should either use likely insufficient or unlikely as a term. And I suggest the term unlikely, given the headings of the data that you supply that don't look like they'll be achieved by 2030.
Thank you for that. We will take that feedback on board, and you're right. It's unlikely we will hit those 2030 targets. But what I can say is that we are now starting a piece of work to really relook at those headline indicators and targets for the RLTP 2027 process, and very keen to work with you all and taking your input to really get more reasonable targets and just really getting your feedback on how we could make these more representative of the context today and the challenges we're facing with the transport network today.
That's noted, but these are the words that you've used, that's all.
Thank you for that.
So could you be perhaps, are you able to change the wording
Yes.
for future
Yes, we can
reporting?
make that. Yeah.
I'll do a follow on, so that from Councillor Leggett. So when we're doing that work ahead, I'd be really interested to have some comparative analysis for the other RTCs around the country and see how we compare as actually, are we over ambitious with our targets, or are we underperforming versus other areas? And I don't know if that's an area that Emma might be able to share, because you have the experience of going around the RTCs, don't you? So yeah, Grant, you were going to say something?
So yes, and pulling the measures together, we do look at the measures which are being used across other RTCs within the country, and also look for international comparators as well. So what we were proposing, or what we'll bring back to workshop with you, and then to eventually decide, we'll have both the international comparators, but also how we are doing compared with the rest of New Zealand.
Right, thank you. And just a reminder to members of the committee that I warmly welcome that when we do those kind of workshops, that we do have the members of the committees and the alternates participating, so that sort of adds to our representation from our communities. So thank you. So next question is from Mayor Cretney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question around point 10 under your analysis, just where you've mentioned the significant cost of living pressures with economic downturn impacting regional freight on rail. Do you believe that that is the reason it's directly attributable to that, or could part of the downturn in regional freight being moved by rail, the significant increase in costs from KiwiRail on rail?
Through you, Madam Chair, the first observation is that it's just not rail freight that has been affected by the economic downturn. We also see that where we do have figures or information available for heavy long distance freight, that is also affected, and this is consistent with previous downturns in the economy, where the amount of freight moved both by rail and road is correlated to the level of economic activity. We don't have a view about the commerciality of the pricing of KiwiRail versus long distance road operators.
So I'm just looking at point 10, and you've stated a 28% decrease of rail. So my point is not about road freight, it's about the rail freight dropping by 28%, and the reason.
Do you have a page number?
Page 7. Just item 10.
So through the chair, I guess that's what we have observed from the figures that we have from QRL. We don't have further information as to, I accept and understand your point and your question, but I don't feel we're in a position to be able to answer as to why that particular figure has occurred. We do know that KiwiRail has been through, and I've been, through you, Madam Chair, if KiwiRail wish to respond, they've been through a significant period of rehabilitation and repair. And I think when you are renewing infrastructure, you do have less capacity, but that's not really a position for us to comment on. So that's what we've seen. That's what the data is telling us. The reasons behind that, we don't at this point have an explanation. That's what we're seeing. So that's what we're reporting, and that's what we've had in the monitoring framework. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wonder, just checking in, Andy, if you want to add any comment there, or is it possible for us to request some more information from KiwiRail? So, because it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I think that's probably something I'll have to do anyway, and get some more information to bring back to the group on some of the details where I can on KiwiRail's kind of commercial operations in the freight space.
That would be really good, thank you. Perhaps it could be circulated as an email. Thank you. So, Councillor Ponta.
Thank you. So, coming back to the reduction in patronage, irrespective of how it's occurred, are we seeing that in any particular days of the working week more than others?
If we're talking about bus patronage, I think what the discussion was Mondays and Fridays, we're seeing those days more affected. Not so much in the middle of the day, of the week. I think this is what Stephen was talking about before. Yeah.
So, this question may be more to Sam, but one of the things that we're interested in as a public transport provider is smoothing the network so that you don't have to buy too many buses for the peak or too many trains for the peak, etc. And there's a lot of money that can be saved in not having to do that. Have we got to the point where we are potentially in a new normal that we need to start thinking about the off-peak fares? And for example, would we get to a situation where all day Wednesday or all day Friday or all day Monday are actually off-peak because we're trying to smooth the network and encourage a distribution and people to actually make different choices about when they travel?
Through you, Chair, I think the way that public transport is funded, we need to look at the obviously there's the rates aspect, the fares aspect, and the Waka Kotahi, the NZTA contribution, and there's a balance to be had across all of those things. When we look at changing fares, for example, in order to try to stimulate patronage, then there's an impact on that whole balance. So I would say that where we're at the moment with this kind of new pattern seeming to be a thing that is continuing, certainly has been continuing over the last 2 years, we are looking at the way we forecast the patronage and what the implications could be of changing the balance perhaps between fares and those other funding sources across the network. That could be something that we might look at in the LTP frame, but it's quite complicated because there are so many factors at play, and in the current situation where we've got a lot of disruption in the Hutt Valley due to Riverlink, where we can expect that we might have more patronage on rails over the kind of next 5 years. It might be more a redistribution of things rather than looking at point solutions, which can be difficult to implement.
Is it all right with you, Councillor Ponta? We know you're hard to please. Good, which is a good thing. Okay, I think that finishes all the round of questions. So thank you very much.
Pardon my ignorance. How am I supposed to put my hand up?
No, we don't have the. It's a this thing. It can be. It can be left or right. Sorry, it's a different microphone system to the Kapiti Coast Council chambers. So we just put our little hand up. I'll pick up on that, and then I'll put you on my list.
Sweet.
That's how I work, folks. So,
The question is actually following a little bit on what Mayor Wild was talking to. I find this a very generic report. I don't know if that's the intent of the report to be as generic as it is, but I'd be interested in knowing what that is relevant to the Kapiti Coast. I'm sure other people here want to find out how it's relevant to their respective areas as well. Does that happen in a different reporting mechanism than this one? I appreciate what was said that there is a monthly report around that, but this is an annual report. I would have thought that information would have been summarised in this report.
I'd actually say that, for example, on Thursday we have our Public Transport Committee and we have that kind of breakdown there. So you might want to have a look at that agenda and see if what you're looking for is in there, because that's how we normally do our reporting back.
Sure, and just for clarifying, that one on Thursday, is that a regional council hui? Doesn't include the individual councils themselves?
No.
Right, okay,
no.
so...
But it's live streamed.
I appreciate that, but again, we're here looking at this report, would have been nice to have had that information summarised here rather than having to go along to another meeting that we don't actually have an invite to get that information. This is a summary of that information as an annual report. I thought it would have been here, so I'd just like to pass that on in future. That would be quite helpful.
Okay, so I think we'll conclude that item. Thank you very much.
Kia ora, Chair. I just have one follow up from Darren, Councillor Ponta's question. Can I jump in there?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. So following on from Councillor Ponta's question around the interaction with the fares and the patronage on rail in particular, but also on buses. I know that this is of the most recent financial year report, but I'm just curious, could anyone summarise the change in patronage from the shift of the government's approach away from, more funding towards their share of the patronage makeup?
Through you, Chair, can I just clarify, do you mean in terms of the private share target, the implementation of that?
Yeah, so when the government was funding more of the government share and it was cheaper for people individually to use those services, did we see, what was the change and how does that relate to now in terms of patronage? Has it dropped off when it was more expensive and then recovered, or?
Here comes Tim.
I'm going to pass that over to Tim. This is Tim Shackleton, who's the Senior Manager of Strategy and Investments at Metlink.
Thank you very much.
Kia ora koutou, through you, the Chair. I'm, as Sam said, Tim Shackleton, the Manager of Strategy Investments. My team also sets the fares for public transport services. It's fair to say we have seen a drop-off. There's two particular reasons we see the drop-off. The first one was obviously the half-price fares, which were being paid for by the government. We have seen a slight decline in patronage for some demographics associated with the half-price fares. In addition, the investments, obviously we didn't have a lot of our significant investments funded, so these are the sorts of things we'd use to upgrade our network, improve train stations and amenity. Obviously a lot of that funding was not approved in the last round of the NLTF, and while it does take time, that lack of investment in infrastructure is probably putting a cap on our growth in patronage, and as Vij and the team have identified, there is clearly a degree of slowing down of mode shift and patronage as a result. So investments and half-price fares probably did have quite a significant impact on our business.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks for that answer, Tim. Awesome. Okay, well, we'll move on to item number 5 now. So, Emma, welcome you to, are you all set up there for your presentation? And just let us know how you want to run this.
Sure. I'll get the slides up. So just in terms of this presentation, which some of you will have seen around the National Land Transport System and what the Transport Agency does. I will run through this at a relatively quick clip. I appreciate not everyone will have seen it, but I will pause probably around a couple of points and just invite any questions. So if we do that on rather than just questions as we go, that will perhaps help to consolidate how we go. So it's not to you. Perhaps I'll turn it on. That might work better. No, it's on now. But... No. Okay, so these are largely contextual slides. So, and you're familiar that NZTA plans, invests, develops, maintains, and regulates the land transport system. So at any time, we can have conversations about any aspects of this. The scale of our activities is large, impacts on anyone who actually accesses and uses different aspects of the land transport system. And while we have sole responsibility for the state highway system, we co-invest across most of the rest of the land transport system as well. If we go to the next slide, so for each council, whether you're a road controlling authority or a public transport authority, there are important roles and functions that you carry out in the system. And one that we'll be talking about more in today's session with our GW officers is the development of the region's land transport plan. This is vitally important because the way the system works is that if an activity is not in the regional land transport plan, we cannot consider it for funding from the National Land Transport Fund. So that's vitally important. And also, if you're putting projects into the RLTP, which comes to this committee to be finalised, you have to have the funding to pay for your share. You can't put in proposals for other road controlling authorities or public transport authorities because unless you're prepared to pay and they agree. So there's some obligations in there about how things get into the plan. If a project is significant for a region and doesn't meet the government policy statement priorities, you can fund it 100%, and both councils and road control authorities and public transport authorities from time to time will fund things 100% themselves, or in partnership with developers or other parties. So we have examples where significant developments have occurred and a council has partnered with a developer to put new infrastructure onto the state highway network, for example. What's also important is that if you're a road controlling authority, there are certain obligations that are set out in the GPS. One is to report on temporary traffic management and another is to report on pothole repairs. And for public transport authorities, so that's GW, the requirements include shifting to increase private share and to adopt the national ticketing solution for public transport. And then we audit your program to ensure that funding is being utilised in the way that is expected of that. So those are things that we will monitor and report on to Minister. Also, the government tends to take close interest in how our partners are getting on with their programs, that their forecast expenditure on significant activities is going on track, and that we don't end up in a situation that can occur where there's a lot of optimism about when activities are going to be delivered, and the reality in some situations is that for a range of reasons projects don't proceed at the pace they're anticipated, and then that funding's not utilised within the National Land Transport Program. That's the 3-year period. That means that other activities that could have been funded don't get funded, and we would much rather that if programs aren't going to proceed, we get an early update so that that money can be utilised in a timely way. So those are some of the critically important things. If we go to the next slide, I'm going to just really go very quickly through these. We have a structure that really reflects those core functions I outlined earlier. They're quite familiar in terms of what councils may also have, in terms you have a policy setting, long-term planning function, a service delivery function, our commercial and corporate function, which actually runs the National Land Transport Fund and any financing activities, and then our regulatory, which is all of the licensing of people and vehicles to access and use the land transport system. On to the next slide. And we have the 6 roles that we play across that system. And I can talk to any of those in more detail, but that's really just the overview for you. And we can go to the next slide. And what's pretty important for us is our regions. And so we have, we're a nationally run organisation, but we have 5 regions that we work within. And so in Wellington, top of the south, I'm the Director of Regional Relationship. We have a regional leadership team that has people from across all those different functions in our business that look at what's happening in each region and supports our teams in each region to deliver and work in partnership with mana whenua and councils and other key actors in the land transport system. Next slide, please. So this is one of our really important slides, and it will shape the year ahead for all of us. So NZTA is a Crown entity. So under the Crown Entities legislation, we are required to give effect to government policy. So that's an obligation on our board. This is a really important one when we look at something like the government policy statement. So once the government releases a government policy statement or an all-of-government direction that's tabled in Parliament, we're required to give effect to that. And I'll talk to this as we talk about the regional land transport plans, what councils may consider a priority is up to you. If it doesn't align with the government priorities, then it gets progressively more difficult to fund it. So as you come through the RLTP process, that's required to have regard and consider government policy settings. But once activities from the RLTP come into NZTA for consideration, we are required to give effect to the government policy statement. So if it excludes certain activities, we simply can't fund it. So it's a critically important part of our system. The government is working on its GPS at the moment, a draft GPS, which will come out for consultation and engagement, and it's a really important thing for councils to consider that and provide feedback on it in terms of thinking about the things that you want to see enabled for your land transport system in the region. We also have a governing act, which is the Land Transport Management Act, which defines our functions around investment, infrastructure and regulation. And then other pieces of legislation determine other roles, which include things like toll roads and the driver and vehicle requirements that come through our regulatory function. Magic does happen. So the GPS, as I mentioned, is critically important. So it guides our decision making on how we invest. It sets some requirements and parameters, and also forecasts how much revenue will be raised and how it's going to be spent across activity classes. And these are really important for us to consider and to be conscious of in terms of thinking about the scale of investment and activity across the country and within each region. So we have 11 activity classes. There are 3 there that relate to the state highway around improvements, pothole prevention and operations. They're mirrored in local government with local road improvements, pothole prevention and operations. We have public transport services and public transport infrastructure. We have the safety activity class, which includes the 1.3 billion for road policing. So we fund 1,070 dedicated staff members in road policing and the related costs of that service from New Zealand Police. 1 billion into the rail network, of which is also significant Crown funding, and 460 million in walking and cycling, plus some funding for investment management. So the scale of investment in the GPS sets upper and lower bands for each of those activity classes, and the board determines where in those bands we will target. But the whole thing has to balance, and it's forecast out for 10 years, and we have to balance everything across the 10 years as well. So when we get the new GPS coming out as draft, it's really important to look not only at the structure of those activity classes, which can change between GPSs, but also at the 10-year forecast, because that starts to have quite significant impacts on what can happen over time, particularly if activity classes decline or stay the same. So those are things to look out for. The other important thing about the GPS process is that, and this happens every year, so we shouldn't be surprised by it, is the draft GPS will come out by the middle of this year, and you'll have the opportunity to see and provide feedback on that. There'll be a general election in November, and depending on the outcome of that, we may end up with a redrafted GPS early in 2027. So it is really important as each part of the system, and including the RTC, is considering how do we prepare for our RLTP, which is a really critically important document, that we maintain openness around the fact that the key system setting policy statement will not be finalised until early in the new year, and it may change from the earlier signals. So it's really important to have that longer term view. These are 30, 50-year assets or longer that we're thinking about. What's that look like over time? What's the full picture that we want to see in our land transport system? And then if there are changes in priority that come through that GPS process, we remain well positioned to adjust and put forward packages that are going to be have the greatest chance of success through that process. I'll just pause there in case there's any questions around that side of things.
Oh, yes. Mayor Wild and Councillor Edwards.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks, Ian. And essentially the pothole prevention is about the road surface. Mm-hmm. Yep. So this is about managing the life cycle of the road surface. So potholes will obviously occur when that road surface breaks up, and then it has an impact on people's journeys. Okay, thanks for that. So can I do a supplementary, Mr. Chair? So the local road operation is 2.25 billion. Little less, sorry, I should have turned that on. So for us in South Wairarapa, with our hill country and very old roads, windy roads that were built often a century ago, not built for 50-ton logging trucks, potholes are actually quite big. It could be the whole side of the road slipping away. In fact, I could give you many examples. You're coming up shortly. I'm sorry you're not staying longer. We'd give you a tour. And frankly, a pothole of that size is of no meaning to us. But when the side of the road's slipping away, can we count that as a pothole and apply to this fund for that too? So all of both the operations and the pothole prevention funding sits on your allocations for continuous programs. The boundaries between the different funds, your officers will advise you. They work with our people on what fits where. And so when you have major challenges in your network, there are a whole range of things that we'll work with councils on around that, including levels of service and at what point you move from an active management to repairs or reinstatements of the road. So that they are ongoing challenges. I know your network. I know that you've got some very challenging parts of that network that are subject to ongoing movement of the underlying land. So there are things we keep working with you. You'll be familiar across the country. We're having some pretty significant events that are impacting on networks right around the country. We have a range of councils looking at options, including decreasing levels of service and changing the way they manage some of their road network, simply because the wear and tear is proving challenging to maintain in those circumstances. So they're things we work with each council on, and the thing with this GPS is it's very clear that maintaining the existing asset and is a priority. It's really important, and I think that will continue regardless of any changes in future government. That the messages are clear and consistent, that existing assets and being really clear about levels of service and how they're maintained and utilised is going to be very important.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Thanks, Emma. Councillor Edwards and then Mayor Cretney.
You might have already answered my question because I had a similar one. So wondering where your climate resilience program fits in under activity class and whether you had any estimate or guesstimate of how much climate related, the storms that we're getting is eating into the budget that you have got for improvement work and so on.
And we don't have separate funding for resilience. It sits across our business. So we do maintain a separate fund for emergency response, so that is being utilised absolutely within the system, and those emergency responses have different funding assistance rates applied depending on the nature of the event, the scale of it relative to the council impacted. So we are working through that every time we have an event, and in some situations we get additional Crown funding depending on the scale of the event as well.
Thank you. Mayor Cretney and then Councillor Randall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Emma, I just have a question going back to my question to the previous paper around potential increases of KiwiRail influencing road freight. Does NZTA have the ability to respond if KiwiRail decides to put their prices up for rail, which transfers into the freighting, and we're getting more trucks on our roads, local roads? Can you respond to that, and we can look for significant funding to recoup that extra damage which is occurring because of KiwiRail putting their prices up?
No.
So how does the council respond to that occurring?
And look, these are probably wider policy settings questions than this presentation is directly targeting. But there is a wider operating environment where we have a range of activities across our network. So on the road network, any permitted activity is a permitted activity. And so any road user, if they're a heavy vehicle, will be paying road user charges. So if there's a question about whether the road user charges are set right, then we need to go to look at the funding and financing settings and make changes to road user charges to make that more sustainable. You'll recall that during COVID, there were decisions made on the basis of supporting households that fuel excise duty and road user charges increases were paused. That's had a significant impact on the fund and the revenue into the fund over time, and you can't really catch that up again because to catch that up would require a massive leap in those charges. So those, and I'll come on to the fund in a bit more detail in a moment, but because it's hypothecated, those things come into the fund and we use them. Rail has a really important role to play, and we absolutely support it because we can see that having a balance in both and using the most appropriate mode for different types of freight movement is an important part of our system. But again, that's a wider policy question as well.
Awesome, thank you. Councillor Randall.
Yes, I'm actually keen to get on to the part of it about the money. But just one question, because you outlined the importance of the GPS and the government's looking at reviewing it, but also the importance of the regional land transport strategy. Now we're in reference to the next item, and we're just about to look at a plan to relook at the regional land transport strategy, starting with the objectives. And I was just wondering whether or not you could comment on the on where the objectives of the Wellington Regional Land Transport Strategy, how much freedom we have to set them, or how much do we need to align with the GPS and the government policies in respective areas. And I know there's a tension there, and you've already outlined that your funding is partly constrained by compliance with the GPS. So I was wondering if you could give us some advice about how we should tackle this objectives thing, because this is going to be a very important thing for the next probably 8 years, really, in the longer term, and I'm very keen to get our objectives correct.
Mm. And look, it is a judgment call for the members of the committee in representing your communities and the parts of the system that you have an interest in. I know I can say that I have worked with a number of RTCs across most of the Lower North Island, and RTCs can take a range of positions on this, and it's just the important thing is to calibrate your ambitions and your targets relative to your ability to achieve them. And so that's a judgment call about considering where the government priorities sit, where the funding is available, and where your co-investment is available as well. Because all of those things need to line up in order to be able to set your aspirations, your targets, and the activities that enable you to achieve them. So it is a balance, but I wouldn't recommend going all out on things that don't align with a future GPS, simply because once you come in for consideration for funding, you're less likely to be able to get it. Okay, I will crack on into revenue. So we get funding from fuel excise tax, road user charges, and other fees. And as I mentioned, it's a hypothecated fund, so it doesn't go into the consolidated Crown accounts. It goes straight into the fund and then can only be used for the purposes as set out in the fund. The other question I inevitably get is what happens to traffic fines for people who our road policing colleagues or our own safety cameras pick up. They do go into the consolidated fund. From time to time, as the case has been made, that should go into further investment in safety treatments, but there's also a concern that may generate a level of activity that's not targeted to risk. It's targeted to revenue rather than risk, and we want it to be firmly targeted to risk. So it sits as it currently does at the moment. And so coming into the fund here, we have our revenue on the left-hand side, tollings there, and that goes into the fund. We also have a Crown borrowing facility that we have been granted by a minister, which goes into the fund. And then once we consider the RLTPs, we develop the National Land Transport Program. And that is the plan for investment over the forward 3 years. And from time to time, the Crown will also determine that it wants to see specific activities funded and will provide Crown appropriations for those specific activities. So there's been Roads of Regional Significance program, for example, was funded through Crown appropriations. And then we line those things up against the activity class expenditure. We fund road policing and rail through those activity classes, and then we co-fund with councils through the program for all the other activities. So that's relatively straightforward, in case there's any questions on that one.
Yes, Councillor Boyer.
Maybe a question with some relevance. We look at the one of the main drivers for funds is the fuel excise and the road user charges. There is a change coming possibly around that. Do you have any idea the amount of non-compliance with payment of road user charges and the overall effect that has to your amount of funding, possible funding?
I don't have that at my fingertips. Obviously, with any system, fuel excise duty is a pretty tight one in terms of leakage. It's pretty difficult not to pay it if you pay at the pump. Road user charges is very much reliant on people reporting and paying appropriately. With heavy vehicle users, obviously we use our commercial vehicle safety teams. We'll be doing quite a lot of compliance work with them. And then increasingly we have to look at our wider systems about how we collect and use information to ensure that we get as little leakage as possible in the system. So moving to fleet-wide RUC, for example, that's a big factor in thinking through how we design it and how we ensure that it maintains a level of accuracy.
Can I just ask this? So you would think there is the possibility for significant leakage of funding through the road user charges system?
Didn't say that. I said the design of the system is really important.
Okay. Thank you.
We have our National Land Transport Program, which I've mentioned, and so the current one aligns to the current priorities of economic growth and productivity, maintaining existing networks, safety and value for money. We'll be spending around $32.9 billion in the current 3-year period. Again, that will change over time. So the day we release it, at the start of the period, it's accurate, and we have a series of committed activities, possible and probable, or probable and possible. So committed activities have funding already committed. They generally go ahead. Probable are the ones that we expect to fund during the period that are on track and on a pipeline to be underway. And possible are actually unlikely to be funded, but they're there because if other things change, we want to have that broader pool of activities we can bring forward and fund. And as I've mentioned earlier, 100% of state highway maintenance and improvements are funded, and then an average of 53% of local programs and activities. Most are actually at 51%, and particularly in this region, most are at 51%, and that's through the funding assistance rate. And then we also have our national programs like national ticketing and safety cameras. Funding assistant rates are always an interesting topic of conversation. I'm not going to go into them here. There is a methodology that's available on our website, exactly how they're calculated and what they are. We know that they're really important to councils, and any change to them is also of great significance. We do note most councils would like a higher funding assistance rate, but it's a zero-sum game. So if someone gets more, someone else will get less. So that's the way the system is set up and operates. So generally speaking, if you're getting a 51% FAR, that means that you've got a good ratepayer base relative to your road network. The other points in that assessment, I'm certainly happy to talk about offline with anyone. We've talked about RLTPs. I think won't go into any more detail on that, but we've obviously got more discussion on this later in the session. But as I said, the critically important thing for each member organisation is to know what your long-term plan is and priorities are, and then to bring forward the best of those in any given RLTP process. There'll always be a lot more demand than funding available. And we'll talk some more about this, obviously, in the next session as well. The other thing to be aware of is the investment prioritisation method. So under our legislation, we're required to develop and release this once we have a new GPS. And this goes through the technical guidelines for how we prioritise funding in the NLTP. So how we actually formulate that. It actually takes down to a more granular level how we interpret the GPS. So it's a really important input to decision making. And as it says there, the last time we did this, we had more than 5 billion over subscription in terms of requests for funding. We'll be doing our own proposal, the State Highway Investment Proposal, or SHIP, even though we don't do any maritime investment. And that will set out what we propose to put into the State Highway. And similar to yours, it's our bid for funding. It comes through the RLTP process. And that requires prioritisation alongside all other activities. And I've mentioned your funding and that you can fund it through local share if it's not a priority in the GPS. And the reporting requirements. So I've mentioned those, and they may change under a new GPS. And procurement processes is something that we'll always be looking at, and our team will be working with your officers on those. And just touching briefly on Wellington, we have current plan for the state highways. We have roads of national significance, roads of regional significance, a safety program and active mode programs, all of which are underway at different stages of investment and activity. We've got forecast investment over the current NLTP, which is sitting around 3.3 billion. And some highlights there around some of the key programs and activities are underway. Again, I can answer any questions on any specific items there. And that's the end of that. So it's a relatively quick skate through, but if you have any particular questions, happy to answer any other questions.
Councillor Halliday.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Oh, just a curiosity question. The National Land Transport Programs funded by fuel excess duty, etc. Is 100% of those funds allocated to this program? Because I noticed that you talk about we are forecast to spend a certain amount, but is that the full amount? Is that utilised as a full amount in our roading system?
And so the funds from that are in the National Land Transport Fund, we forecast forward over a 10-year period, and then we commit funding over 3-year chunks through the National Land Transport Program, and we aim to spend all of the available funding within that period.
So just for clarity, all the funding collected for that purpose is used for that purpose?
Yes,
yep, okay.
That's what the fund requires.
I'm assuming it's a typo here that the government's portion is only 2.5 million.
Billion, yes, sorry, that was an error. I corrected it in the presentation.
But I do notice that they're the smallest contributor. But okay, thank you.
Excellent. So I might actually, if that's okay, I think we haven't got any other questions. We'll move on to the last item so that we stay to our timetable. Thank you very much, Emma. Expect a lot of questions along the way. So I appreciate that you're in this committee with a lot of experience. So for those of us like myself who are new to this particular committee, really appreciate that knowledge. Thank you. So welcome. We've got our Emma Hope here. So for our last item, which we have a recommendation for. So thank you.
Kia ora koutou, ko Emma Hope aho. My name's Emma Hope and I'm a Senior Strategic Advisor in the Regional Transport Strategy team here at Greater Wellington. Today I'm presenting to you for your decision this paper, which is on the proposed public engagement and consultation approach for development and acceptance of the Regional Land Transport Plan 2027. I'll take the paper as read and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, my question I have on page 83. When we look at the key stakeholders and audiences, is that list there in any sort of hierarchical order or priority order? And I wonder if the business and freight stakeholders is actually a pretty critical conversation in there.
It's in no hierarchical order, so it's just as it sort of came through. We've got more in-depth background documents, I suppose, through our operational planning as to who those stakeholders are. As far as the freight and business, at the moment it's mostly been through internally through members like our Kiwi Rail partners, and also through the Transporting New Zealand, which is the Ara Aotearoa, which represent quite a significant number of the freight and movement companies. So it's not an exhaustive list, and it's something that we sort of keep working on as people come up or things arise.
So I'd just like to, from my perspective, highlight that is, to me, really important. Anybody else got any other questions? I also wanted to ask the question about budget for consultation, please.
Yeah, thank you. We had a look through. We've got a penciled in budget for this project of around $96,000, which is to the end of next year or to the end of the financial year, and includes all of the first phase engagement that's mentioned in the report, as well as the formal consultation. That is eligible for the NZTA FAR, so from our Greater Wellington budgets, and it's confirmed through the Greater Wellington long-term and annual plan processes. From speaking with some of our other regional council counterparts, it's roughly in the same ballpark as some of the other regional councils, such as Canterbury, who have a similar population.
Thank you for finding out about that. So have I got anybody else who wants to ask a question, and anybody online? Because I can't see anybody else who's left on there. So any views on anybody wanting to move this if we haven't got any more questions? Okay, in which case I'll move the recommendation number 1. Anybody like to second that for me? Thank you, Councillor Randall. So any discussion? So Councillor Randall and then Emma.
Yes, so I get the sense we're about to embark on a journey down the yellow brick road, because this is one of the big things that we do. I just want to thank everybody, and including the people who did the performance monitoring reports, about getting the good background that we need, and just to flag that we all need to be engaged to get this region to do better in terms of its transport outcomes. So this is an important part, and I encourage any stakeholders who are watching to get engaged at the appropriate time.
Thank you. And Emma.
Yeah, just in addition to my comments earlier, it's really important as we go through the formative stages to keep that engagement open so that we don't preempt what a final GPS would look like. And so just really encourage as you set up those forums and the engagement, that community engagement is really important and really valuable. But keep those questions open, keep the engagement wide and future focused so that we're then able to ensure that the region is really well positioned, whatever the GPS structure looks like in the end.
Great, thank you very much. So any more debate, comments? Thank you very much. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, the motion is carried. Thank you very much, Emma. So that concludes our agenda. We have 10 minutes or 9 minutes before the workshop starts, so that's nice amount of time for us to just refresh. Thank you very much for helping us go really well through our first meeting. And I just want to close with before others start talking down the back there, we're going to close with a karakia. Kia hora ti marina, kia whakapapa punamu ti moana. He huru haurahi mā tātou I te rangi nei. Araha atua aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa. Homie, Huie, Tai Kie. Thank you very much, everybody.